Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera and good day. This session we will learn about the pelvic girdle muscles. Okay, the pelvic girdle muscles, basically the muscles that move the hip joint. Okay, now the objective is to identify the origin, the insertion and function of pelvic girdle muscle. Let's take a look at the overall general overview of pelvic girdle muscle. The pelvic girdle muscles are grouped into flexors, extensors, abductors and also rotators. Now, kita tengok yang senang dulu iaitu flexors and extensors. Okay, the pelvic girdle muscle arises, those flexors are actually at the anterior compartment or anterior part of the pelvic cavity. Okay, and it arises actually, it is inside the abdominal and pelvic cavity. It attaches itself along the lumbar vertebra as well as the pelvic pelvic bone. Okay, so kita tengok sikit, zoom sikit pada flexor muscles. Flexor muscles of the pelvic girdle or that move the hip joint, there are two. Okay, number one is what we call as the iliacus, taken the name of the iliac bone where it originates. Okay, and most of the fibers originate from the iliac or ala of ilium. Okay, and then this iliac bone will further insert at the point of lesser trochanter of femur. Another flexor is the psoas major muscle. Psoas major muscle. Psoas major muscle originates from the lumbar vertebrae. Okay, it originates from the lumbar vertebrae. It also inserts itself at the same point as iliacus, that is at the lesser trochanter. Okay, after the inguinal line, that attach itself at the ASIS and to the pubic tubercle, these two fibers, the iliacus and the psoas major, they combine together to form iliopsoas muscle. Iliopsoas muscle. Okay, iliopsoas muscle. Right? They changed the name because the fibers merge. Okay, right. The function of these two are to flex the hip joint, Okay, now the extensors, the extensor group is gluteus maximus muscle. Gluteus maximus muscle. Let's take a look at the gluteus maximus. Gluteus maximus is at the posterior part of the gluteal region. Okay, it originates from the spinous processes of sacral bone. Okay, spinous processes of sacral bone, and it inserts itself at the iliotibial tract. Okay. Iliotibial tract is not a muscle, it is actually a fibrous connective tissue to form a sheath at the lateral part of our thigh. Okay, and the function of gluteus maximus is the prime mover of hip extension. However, because gluteus maximus is a huge muscle, it also helps in lateral rotation and abduction of hip joint. Okay, lateral rotation and also abduction of hip joint. Now, we want to look at the rotators. Okay, the rotators. The rotators, there are four muscles that form rotation of the hip joint. They are the piriformis muscle, the obturator. Okay, look at here, piriformis muscle, the superior gemellus muscle, the obturator internus muscle, and inferior gemellus muscle, as well as the quadratus femoris muscle. Okay, again I repeat, from superior to inferior, the piriformis muscle, the piriformis muscle, the superior gemellus muscle, the obturator internus muscle, and the inferior gemellus muscle, as well as the quadratus femoris muscle. Quadratus femoris muscle. Okay. These one, two, three, four, five muscle has different origin, but they have similar insertion. They insert themselves at the intertrochanteric crest at the posterior part of the femur. Okay, the piriformis it originates from the lateral border of the sacrum, lateral wall or lateral border of the sacrum. Okay, the superior gemellus originate from the superior pubic ramus. The obturator internus originate from the obturator foramen. Okay, the inferior gemellus originate from the ischium. Okay, and the quadratus femoris originate from the ischial tuberosity. Okay, they all do the same function, that is to laterally rotate the hip joint. Lateral rotate the hip joint, because look at the fiber, when they shorten, this fiber will pull the hip joint. Okay, they pull posteriorly, so the hip will lateral rotate. Okay, right. Then we have the abductors group. Okay, the abductors group are the gluteal muscles. Okay, there are three gluteal muscles. The gluteal maximus, gluteus maximus is the outermost. Okay, and if we dissect the gluteus maximus, we will see underneath it is gluteus medius, and also gluteus minimus. Okay, gluteus medius and also gluteus minimus. Both gluteus medius and gluteus minimus arises or originate from the posterior part or upon lateral wall of ilium, ala of ilium, but on the lateral wall, not the medial wall. The medial wall is iliacus. Okay, so the lateral wall or the posterior wall of ilium, ala of ilium. They insert themselves at the greater trochanter of the femur. Okay, greater trochanter of the femur. So what do? They actually helps in medial rotation of the hip joint. Okay, so let's take a look at this diagram from matter, where the position of the rotators and also the abductors as well as the extensor. Okay. The extensor is only one. We know already is gluteus maximus. Okay, the most superficial gluteal muscle. Underneath gluteus maximus, if we cut the gluteus maximus, we can see the gluteus medius and also gluteus minimus muscle that helps in the medial rotation of the hip joint. Okay, we can also see underneath the gluteus maximus. Okay, if we cut open the gluteus maximus, we can see 5 muscles from superior to inferior. They are piriformis muscle, superior gemellus muscle, obturator internus muscle, inferior gemellus muscle, and quadratus femoris muscles. All are agonists of lateral abduction of hip joint. Lateral abduction of hip joint. It also helps in ABD or abduction of the hip. The gluteus medius and gluteus minimus also helps in ADD, adduction of hip joint. So remember, the flexor of hip joint, there are two, iliacus and psoas major, or you can simply call them iliopsoas muscle. The extensor of hip joint is gluteus maximus. The medial rotators are the gluteus medius and gluteus minimus. The lateral rotators are the 5 muscles underneath them. Inferior to them. Piriformis, superior gemellus, inferior gemellus, obturator internus, and quadratus femoris. Gluteus maximus also helps, remember, apart from extension of the hip, it also helps in ABD, abduction, and also lateral rotation of the hip joint. But it is not the prime mover. It just agonists the other movement. It is the prime mover of hip extension. Until then, thank you very much.